Welcome to Sacred Stories Podcast, a place to explore and discuss new and exciting books of consciousness. I am your host, Reverend Patricia Caginello, and speaking with authors that have shared their wisdom and stories through their books is one of my favorite things to do. Today we are speaking with Sora Garrett, a contributing author to our new book of inspiring stories, Chaos to Clarity, Sacred Stories of Transformational Change. Sora Garrett is a life simplification guide and a philanthropreneur. I think she made that word up, but we'll find out, who helps people move from overwhelm to overflow with her writing, mentoring, and collaborative giving programs. You can find her books, including The Miracle Keys, which I just read and loved, and her courses and free inspiration at soragarrett.com. So welcome, Sora, to Sacred Stories.
Oh, thank you, Patricia. It's great to be here.
So philanthropreneur, let's just clear that up. Is that a made-up word?
Well, I did make it up. I became a social entrepreneur before I even knew that was something that existed. And then I got kind of tired of that word. And I like philanthropist because it basically means somebody who loves humanity. It doesn't mean you have to be, a huge giver of money. It means you just simply love humanity. But then recently I found somebody else that used philanthropreneur. So I think I might have started something.
Well, I like it. Now that I guess I pronounced it properly, I think the second time, I like it. I like it. So the story that you wrote, so thank you for sharing your story in Chaos to Clarity. The story you wrote is titled Growing Wings. Can you tell us your sacred story that you shared?
Yeah, sure. And it was interesting how that, when I started going back into my story, I don't think I had intended to title it that, but as I started looking at the change that I was writing about, it started with a choice. And I just want to say first that I also call myself a creativepreneur. So I'm a very creative person. And normally I not only thrive on change, but I actually create change in my life because I love change. And so my story started with a choice for change because we had basically been impacted by a lot of the financial downsizing that happened, to a lot of people. I think it was I don't remember what year it was now, but we were affected by that. And my husband and I are both self-employed. And so we decided, rather than be in the position that a lot of people were finding themselves in, of going into bankruptcy and whatever, that we were going to start a downsizing process, or what I call rightsizing, and just get ourselves in a position where we weren't, our financial foundation had kind of been shifted a lot. So we started making that choice to change, and I was actually really excited about it when I started, because I've always been somebody who is very organized, and I don't like a lot of clutter around me. But, as you know, once you're living in a house for 20 years, you start accumulating a lot. So this was going to be a chance for us to really go through and clear some of the non-essential, and just really simplify and lighten up our life. And so I was really excited when it started. But then as we made the choice to change, a bunch of other unexpected changes started happening. And it just kind of ended up, what I call, the subtitle of my story was A Complicated Path to a Simple Life. And while it started out as like this simple choice, it started getting really complicated. And the first thing that was complicated is my body decided to go into menopause. And I started, like, all the little changes that were happening, my emotions were just a wreck. And so it started just being a lot of, not as joyful as I had hoped it would be, I guess is one way to say it. So that, and then my husband got sick. We actually thought he might have cancer. And luckily, it turned out he did not. But for about 6 months, we were kind of hanging on the edge of me being kind of this emotional wreck, him having a potential health issue. And then at the same time, his parents started, they were in their late 80s, and they started needing a lot more of our support. And eventually, I write this a little bit about this a little bit in the story. His mom was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And if you've ever known anybody that has had that illness, it is just one of the most devastating kind of things to watch one of your loved ones go through that. So all of this started happening, and what I started doing is doubting the choice that we had made to start, kind of like ripping up our roots and moving our home and moving a little bit farther away from my grandson, who I cherished spending time with. And, I can just feel in my heart right now, just like, it just got to be such a heavy weight rather than a joy of something I was moving to. It was just like so hard to be moving away from some of the things that I, had really cherished in my life. And, and I really wasn't moving away from them, but it just felt like that at the time with everything that was going on.
Right. Sora, let me just stop you right there for a moment, because your story is so powerful, and I know that everyone listening is like, oh my gosh, the same thing happened to me, or something very similar, right? It's like when we go to initiate a major change in our life, or a major change is upon us, whether we are initiating it or not, it seems like literally all hell can break loose at the same time, right? So you're not dealing just with one thing. And as you're telling your story, I'm sitting here going, I was going through menopause when I was going through my divorce, right? I was going through this, you know what I mean? And there's so many people, they're popping into my head, these people that I'm thinking of that initiated a change or had a change in their life that came upon them, that all kinds of other things started happening at the same time. I mean, isn't that crazy? Or do you, divine timing? Like, what do you think about that? Did you reflect on that and all of it, like the perfect storm?
Yeah, well, and and I say this in my story too, that life is change, right? And we are in a changing time, and more change is happening around us. And so it's kind of like, what you start on this momentum, and then that's what starts happening more and more. And so maybe it's partly that we just notice it more when we're going through something big. But there's always change, and I also say that change brings life. And I truly believe that we're intended to be in, like, celebrating these changes in our life, not like pushing against them. And so my imagery that came to me as I was starting to go through it was of the caterpillar going into the cocoon before you can actually grow the new wings. And I think sometimes what happens is we're in the process of all these changes. Some of them we maybe welcome, some of them we don't. But when we start pushing against the change instead of kind of embracing it, going with it, it almost makes the change like more difficult and maybe last longer. Like maybe we don't go through it as fast because we're pushing against it instead of just going, oh, let's just go with this change and kind of let it flow us into whatever the new is supposed to be. And that's what it was for me. It's just like, okay, I think I made it a lot harder because I started resisting and being unhappy with it instead of going, oh, well, look, here's what I could do with this change,
That's that's really great advice, right? The idea. So change is happening around us, but I still do believe that when we have a big change, it seems to energy attracts, and more big changes come. But maybe we choose to just do it all at one time, right?
Yeah,
to get it over with, or something. But the idea that we could actually, make the process a little more difficult for ourselves by resisting, more than necessary, our perception of the change, or perspective around it. So you were going to do this move, and all this started happening. Did you ended up moving? Did you right size? I love that as well. Did you right size at that point?
Yes, we got rid of quite a few layers, and then we ended up moving my in-laws to assisted living, and I ended up going through their house as well as my own house, as our house. And it was kind of what pushed me or pulled me into the work I'm doing now, because I started looking at all the stuff that we have, that we hang on to, that we don't need, and that kind of makes whatever change we are going through even more complicated. So I started realizing that, I wanted to help myself. And usually the way I work is I help myself, and then I end up helping others because I like to share what I do and what I'm learning. And so I am like, okay, let's clear some of these clutters out so that when we do have a big change hit us, it's not so, there's not so much non-essential stuff covering us, so that we can really get to the core of what, of who we are and what the change is trying to teach us, or, like coax us into. So, but yeah, we are in a smaller place. It's in a bigger yard though. So it's not, sometimes it doesn't feel, I say I simplicized my life, and, yet I have a lot of abundance and richness in my life, so it's not minimalized at all. It's very rich and full of a lot of beauty. And, I kind of feel like simplicity is different for every person, and what we like to keep around us is different for everyone.
So help us with that, though. Help us. What can you tell me and our listeners that can help us get to that point? Because that's a really beautiful place to be, right? Where we've cleared some clutter, we've shed some layers, we're feeling really positive about, and we're able to be in the flow of change and know that ultimately life is changed, like you said, right? So give us a tool or strategy or tip that you used, that we can use as we're going through change.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I have to address it on both the physical and the mental, emotional side, because what I've noticed is that I go through and clear my physical clutter. Like I really don't like to have a lot of clutter around me, because it makes my mind more cluttered. And so where I help people is not just in like getting rid of some of the, like focus in on what you really love and get rid of the rest of the things, so like look at your desktop and go, oh, I love this. This makes me happy to look at it. And when I look at that, it makes me feel overwhelmed. Well, move the stuff, put it in a basket, or, if you can't throw it away or recycle it, put it in a basket or something where you're going to act on it. But just keep what's in front of you, what really brings a smile to your face, is one simple way to do that. And then what I do is, like, to me, that brings my mental state into more spaciousness. So to me, it's always a combination of really getting our mental, emotional clutter cleared by taking deep breaths and really keeping the physical. And, we're all affected differently, because some people can have a totally cluttered space around them and not feel overwhelmed or stressed by that. And others do. So, it's really a personal thing. But is that what you were looking for?
But no, I think, yes, I think you definitely answered the question in the idea of, and I like that, the idea that to separate the physical from the mental, emotional, spiritual, right? And each piece, you can do each piece. And like you said, even just starting and taking and saying, what do I really love? And putting that, let's say, in a box to keep, right? If we're in the right-sizing example, that physical act carries so much energy with it that I believe it does. It allows you the opportunity then mentally, emotionally, spiritually to also take the next step.
And I think what people don't realize is how much like energetic clutter that we have from having the physical clutter around. And that's one of the things that I'm real conscious of is, the more that we can let go of some of the physical, the more our energy starts clearing up and being more free and flowing, in everything. So it's really integrated. And I know whenever I feel like overwhelmed by even something that's going on in the global world, like I'm going to get overwhelmed by some big world crisis, if I just stop and like go clean a drawer out, or clean my kitchen or something, it can kind of shift the energy.
Right. Absolutely. Sora, there's so much in your story, the right sizing story, the growing wing story that you shared. And I'm so happy that it's part of our book, Chaos to Clarity, because it shows another aspect of change. We have so many stories that have really real tragedies, or, tragic events that happened, and people moving through those real stories of loss. But in addition to those, every day, like you said, there's so much change, and people experience significant change through right-sizing, through having a parent that becomes sick, through having multiple things happening at one time and having to deal with them, like you explained in your story. And so your story, Growing Wings, I know will be such an inspiration to so many people that will see themselves in your story. And I thank you. I really thank you. Yeah, I thank you for sharing it, because it will help.
Well, I really appreciate having the opportunity to share it. And, really when you asked me to share it, like going back, I didn't realize there was so many layers and so much complexity. And I was like, wow, no wonder I was so exhausted during those couple of years. No wonder. And it gave me a lot of empathy for myself and what I'd gone through, as well. So yeah, it was great.
Yeah, well, and thank you for sharing that too, because that really is, I think, the beauty of this book, Chaos to Clarity is, and in the beauty of just even writing our stories or taking time to reflect. So whether somebody is inspired now to write write their story and have that experience, or even just in the reading of these stories, there will be so much in them for so many people that will take them to places or give them insights, or if they, take the time to reflect, those aha moments that they'll understand so much more. At the very least, feel connected and know that they're not alone in moving through the change that they're experiencing.
Yeah, and thank you so much again for doing this book, because it's a great gift to the world.
I think so. I really do. It's just an honor to be part of this process, as well. So Sora Garrett, you share so much with the world. And I mentioned in the beginning, you have another book that you've written called The Miracle Keys, which I've read, that I absolutely love. And I was really drawn to it because on the cover is a golden angel, and golden angels are very special to me as well. So please tell everyone your website again, and how they can find out more about what you do, and where they can find, your books as well.
Yeah, thank you. So my website is just simple, just soragarrett.com. And it's SoraGarrett.com. And I do have my books on Amazon and on my website. It shows a little bit more about them there. And I love to blog, and I do a monthly newsletter. I say it's focusing on what's good in the world, because I believe that, kind of part of clearing our clutter is just focusing on joy and wonder and kind of everyday miracles. So yeah, you can find me there. I am on Facebook as well, but I'm trying to get a little bit more on Instagram. But those are my, I actually have a group on Facebook called Journey to Simple. And it's just trying to share inspiration to help people find their own simple.
I love that. So that's Sora Garrett, SoraGarrett.com. And your newsletter is also called Simply Shine, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, that's my blog.
Your
blog.
blog.
My newsletter. Yeah.
Yeah, just really beautiful. Thank you so much, Sora, for being our guest today. And again, for sharing your story, Growing Wings, in our new book, Chaos to Clarity, Sacred Stories of Transformational Change.
Thank you, Patricia. I appreciate the opportunity.
And thank you to our audience for listening. You've been listening to the Sacred Stories podcast. I am your host, Reverend Patricia Caginello. And until next time, I encourage you to pick up a copy of Chaos to Clarity. It's a phenomenal book, and I know you will enjoy it. But in addition to that, as always, I encourage you to write your sacred story well.